Thank you all. It's been so amazing and so many awesome speakers. So what am I going to talk to you about? Well, first of all, I'm Candi, as Rachel kindly said. I'm a content design director, and I kind of hope that's one of the least interesting things about me. I'm also an author. Probably my proudest title is Auntie, and it's very hard to keep the title of cool auntie when you've got 5 nephews and 2 nieces, but alas. So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about leadership, obviously, but I wanted to talk to you about some of the misconceptions that we might place on leadership. And when I was thinking about my talk and what to say, this meme came into my mind. It kind of summed up everything for me, because as someone who sadly uses LinkedIn every day, I found it's become really overwhelming, especially when we consider leadership discourse. Because when you think about the rhetoric on LinkedIn, largely it's telling you to be a perfect leader, you've got to be up at 4 a.m, you've got to have done 450 squats, bench press 45 green smoothies before you start work, which everyone can do, obviously. And however far or near you live to the office, you've got to be the first person in there because the hustle doesn't stop. And how are you possibly going to progress in your leadership career without the water cooler moments? And to top it all off, you've got to post on LinkedIn every day because there's no way you're going to boost your personal brand without that. And of course, you have to get involved in every single design debate there is, especially when it's an AI bot asking you to. It's a lot, and a leader that I really admire summed it up really well, because sometimes it can feel super, super, super overwhelming. It puts a lot of pressure on us. And jokes aside, we don't really talk about it enough, but being a leader is hard. And if I'll be honest, it can feel kind of impossible. Because you have to be ambitious, but not too ambitious. And you can't say you're ambitious because that's not woman-like. You've got to be resilient at all times. If you cry, you're too emotional. If you speak too loud, you're angry. You have to be assertive, but never teetering towards aggressive. You have to give direction in ways that feel like coaching to fix problems, but without getting too involved. You're supposed to wake up around 5 a.m, while maintaining a really good work-life balance. You have to be career-driven enough to succeed, but always put others first, but not be too people-centric that you're seen as weak. You have to manage up, as we've discussed, but also left, right, down, and all around. You've got to answer for things that frankly feel pretty nuts sometimes, but if you point that out, you're accused of complaining. You can't miss a single beat. You have to fight to be invited to all the meetings that, frankly, some of them could have been Slack messages. And you're supposed to do it all with a smile on your face, to be palatable enough not to threaten the patriarchy, but mouldable enough to survive in its world. And you have to never get old, never be rude, never show off, never be selfish, never fall down, never fail, never show fear, never get out of line. And nobody gives you a medal or says thank you. And it turns out, in fact, you're not only doing everything wrong, but it's also all your fault. Fun, right? But don't worry, it's not all bad. We have got books that will teach us a thing or two. They'll talk to us about motivation, how to wake up at 5 a.m, of course. You can tell I'm not a morning person. Sorry for those of you that are. And how to be more efficient and more effective, how to fit more in, how to do more. But they don't seem to tell us much about caregiving responsibilities or how to lead through the small matter of a global pandemic or through mass layoffs. And I wasn't joking when I said I believe it is actually impossible to be a perfect leader. And when I thought really deeply about this, I thought a lot about the leaders that I admire, and some of them are in this room today. And I realised that they're all wonderful in many, many ways, but would they consider themselves perfect? Do I consider myself perfect? Absolutely not, because who is? So what if we flipped it around a little bit? What if we took a bit of the pressure off and we considered that actually it's enough to be a good leader? Because the reality is, as a leader, often you're a hiring manager, skill in itself. As Haldane spoke about, you're a huge emotional support for people through events that might happen in work, but also outside of work. You are your team's biggest cheerleader. We've all spoken about it today. You're constantly cheerleading, pushing for your team. And again, you are a continual JIRA raiser, admin approver for all kinds of things that you thought needed approving. Okay. You are the problem solver that a lot of people will go to. And just to top it off, because you have plenty of time, this isn't much to do, a lot of us are the content ops wizard too. Perfect. So this talk is an ode to the good leaders, and I'm looking at all of you when I say that. Because you, my friends, are all kinds of magic. And yes, it is an honour and it is a privilege to lead, but it is also hard. And there are so many myths out there about what good leaders need to do. Like the books will tell us, and I spent a lot of time trying to work out if I could just prioritise harder and delegate. Yeah, it's easy, you just got to delegate, fine. But the reality is, there is often actually never enough time to do the things we prioritise, and by the time we get there, new things have come in. So we have to learn the art, as Anna mentioned, of actually being able to say no. And that is hard for us all when we are diligent and caring people. And delegation, people talk about delegation a lot, but it's not a skill that people teach you how to do a lot of the time. And we spoke about radical acceptance earlier. I really like Shreyas Joshi's model of radical delegation, because it goes into some of the harder work that you have to do when you're delegating. It takes trust. You have to be able to let go. And what the model also teaches you is how you should approach things. You know, when do you lean in to support? When do you lean out completely? What makes something a candidate for delegating? All things that we really need to focus on when we talk about delegation. And this is one of my favourite myths. And honestly, for years, I thought, just set boundaries. All they say is just set boundaries. Perfect. Set boundaries. Okay. Why is my calendar back to back? I've set my boundaries. That's what you do, right? But the truth is, capitalism doesn't love boundaries. There's no rule book that people have to honour your boundaries. It takes time, and it takes a whole lot of unlearning. So for me, I found it helpful to think about some of my non-negotiables, and a vulnerable moment, I think, a real thing that kind of changed the shape of that was I lost my mum some time ago. And when you see someone have their life taken away from them, it really makes you reflect a lot on your life. And I thought to myself, we spend, for want of a better phrase, a fuck ton of time at work. We spend a lot of time at work. So like that 25%, that's pretty sacred. So if I'm spending all of that trying to catch up on the latest content podcast and read the latest design blogs, like that's a lot. So I thought to myself, why am I doing that? I don't have to do that. I can prioritise my time outside of work for things that have meaning to me. Because yes, for many of us, it's a vocation, a career that we love a lot, but also it's a job. It's a paid exchange for our time for a certain amount of that time. Another thing as content design leaders, there's always something to fight, isn't there? We're fighting that good fight and we're just fighting and fighting and fighting. So now I have to really prioritise the hills I'm going to shout on, which is why you might see me on LinkedIn waxing lyrical about inclusivity. I'm probably not going to fight you over the Oxford comma. It's not a hill I'm going to stand on. And we've spoken a lot about it today, but it is important, and I think as someone who has a number of health issues, my health is always going to come first. That's not a trade-off I'm going to make, and yours should too. And it got me thinking about maturity models too. I love a maturity model. Rachel's is one of my favourite. And I think for years we thought about them as almost this lovely little elevator that just goes up and up perfectly, tick, 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 and you're there. But then I started to think that nowadays the reality is that they're a bit more circular. It's not as simple as them just being a straight line up. And of course there was going to be a tarot reference. Of course there was. Because 1 minute, you're making huge progress. You're on your way to the 1-to-1 ratio, career frameworks in place. You're getting invited to meetings. Things are going well. It's great. And then bam, layoffs. Pandemic. It's that tower moment that changes everything. And suddenly, the maturity model, as you once thought about it, might feel very different. But you know, the magical thing is, and I've heard a lot of people speak today, and I know people have been through layoffs, through wild things happening in companies that they work in, and you're still smashing it. Your teams are still doing amazing work, and that is testament to all of you. And the narratives also have a way of framing it that one size fits all. But let's be real, leadership isn't created equal, because nor are the systems in the world that we operate in. There are a number of systematic place in play here, and inherent inequalities. They are acute for black women, who are much more at risk of burnout. Also, caregivers, disabled people, and people from all marginalised communities. And we should never overlook these when we think about leadership. And finally, in the leadership space, LinkedIn. There's a real notion that you've always got to be on top of your game. You've got to be hustling. You've got to be building your brand. You've got to be fighting for something, arguing over something, and it's exhausting. So we need to normalise that our cups might look different every day because we're human. And if we only have 50% to give one day, and we give 50%, that's our 100%. And why is that important? I really like this quote, and it's something that I learnt the hard way, and I would love for other people to not. If you don't start taking time for yourself, for your mental health, your body, it has a way of taking it for you. And all of this highlights that we're not in perfect circumstances. So perfect leadership is a bit of a myth. So it's not all doom and gloom. So what do we do? What does good leadership look like? And this slightly ugly squash slide, sorry, how to know? It's not me teaching you to suck eggs by any means. But I spoke to a range of different people. I wanted to understand what good leadership looked like to them. And I thought about my own experiences too. And it largely came into these points. And I think this is an area where things can go very, very wrong. Because expectations are so important, especially when people might be looking to develop. Because no one can do a great job if they're not clear what that job looks like. And clarity can be one of the kindest things you give people, because confusion and chaos, it causes so much mess. And there's a number of ways that we can do that in big or small organisations. I think it's really important, and something that I spent a lot of time on, in the same way that other disciplines do, making sure that we have career frameworks in place for content people. And if we're giving direction, being really crystal clear on the what, the why, and the when, but giving people that space to figure out the how. Building foundations and trust, another really important one. You've hired great people, that's not enough. How do we create the space for them to do great work? And I've always thought that the notion of hiring great content designers and then putting them into situations where they have to explain what they do again and again, it's kind of like hiring an amazing private chef, putting them in the kitchen and then making them explain why they're chopping onions. Why are you there? What's food anyway? What is this? Just very backwards, doesn't really make any sense. And I work with a lot of junior content designers who are being put in kind of similar situations where they're being hired to do a job, but then being expected to create the core foundations to do that job. So that's something that we really need to think about as leaders. How are we creating those foundations? But again, to the maturity model, how are we checking in on those foundations? Because the foundations that I set up 3 years ago may or not be working now. And other things we need to think about, which we spoke about earlier, is being really clear on what people are accountable for and what they are not. And I think that's the bit that we often struggle with. It's not reasonable for people to be working across 17 different projects. So what are the priorities and what are not the priorities? Nicole shared some great stuff on that earlier. And another one that can be really hard for us as content people. Naturally, we want to solve all of the problems. We want to chip in, we want to do all of the things. But actually switching to coaching as much as we can to really guide people and help them come up with solutions themselves when they can. Feedback. And having a two-way relationship with feedback is so important because we hear so much, especially in the tech world. Feedback's a gift. Feedback is a gift. It can be. That's not a given. And there's a number of things to think about with feedback. One, the yearly cycle. It doesn't tend to be enough to get into the real nuances that you need. So making sure that you have sufficient timings in place. I find with my team really useful to have a monthly check-in where we just put the day-to-day work down and we talk about things that they need career-wise. But also we need to acknowledge performance reviews can be traumatic. So they should be trauma-informed, and things that we need to think about is considering how safe people feel, giving people good guidance on how to give feedback as well as receive it, and never springing feedback on people, giving them time to make sure that they feel in a place to receive it. There's also a number of social cultural considerations. Black women are often told that they're aggressive, and they tend to score lower on performance reviews. Women often get feedback that they should just be more confident. What does that really mean in practice? And then with the two-way point, making sure people feel able to give you feedback. I think it's really easy as leaders just to say, just give me feedback, but that's not always safe for people with the power dynamics as they are. So coming up with mechanisms where they can do so in a way that feels right for them. And personally, I think some of the best leaders that I've had are those who have taken the time to care about me as an individual and see me more for who I am and what I can do rather than just a way of fulfilling shareholders' needs. And I think leading through a pandemic was a really good one for us to understand people's needs and preferences and how they like to work. And I honestly think it's one of the reasons that the return to office mandates can be really problematic because they're very one-dimensional. They don't necessarily work for everyone. And I think as leaders, it's our responsibility to try and foster workspaces that work for as many people as possible. And of course, in all of it, we need to consider our own biases. We tend to have a thing called affinity bias, where we feel a preference often towards people that share our own experiences, have similar interests and beliefs, etc. And it is our job as leaders to continually break that down. And we spoke about our time earlier, but really respecting other people's time too. I think it's so common for one-to-ones to be the first thing that start dropping off when things are busy, but really making sure that you're prioritising those, that you're understanding other people's boundaries as well. And why this is so important is that respect, that listening, that understanding, that is really at the heart of inclusion. And then the final point on this is really helping people to understand their superpowers and be their best, whether they're working with you or elsewhere. I've been leading content teams for about 7 years now, and one of my main aims is to help people be the best that they can be, whether they work with me or whether they move on to other things, to help them be the best in their careers. But that best is going to look different to everyone. So really getting under the skin of what motivates people, what's important to them, understanding that, and it's not the same for everyone. I think now, the AI debate, we knew that was going to happen, didn't we? I think now with new technologies, etc., we do need to think about actually do the responsibilities, do our career frameworks, do they stack up to what might be happening in the wider industry? I totally agree with Danielle's point. We can't just ignore these things. And I think finally, one of the things that great leaders have done for me is carve out opportunities and help to create those opportunities for people when they might not see them themselves. But if you take one thing away from this talk, it's this. Because everything we've spoken about in this room, the career-defining support, the leadership through change, leads confidence, none of it happens without you. You are important. You're not just signing off holidays, you're shaping people's careers. You're not just changing words in boxes. In many ways, you're changing people's lives by being a good manager. And we only have to look around at what happens when not so good leaders rule, and the stats around bad managers having more of an impact on people's mental health than doctors, to see that this is really important. And I'm not a perfect leader. I'm not standing up here as someone who thinks they are, but I do my best to show up and try and be a good one every day. And I know simply by being here, many of you do too. But it's hard, and you can only do that when you are prioritising and looking after yourself. So a few final takeaways on doing just that. You've got to find your gold stars. And one of the hardest things with leadership is you don't get your gold stars as easily. When you're working on projects day to day, when that's your core responsibility, progress is clear. Good user research session, dopamine hit. Project's ended and it's gone well, dopamine hit. It's not as clear when you move into the leadership rounds. So you've got to work out your gold stars. Mine is things like meaning in my work, inclusivity work, getting focused time to deliver things for my team, and seeing them flourish and grow. And you've got to give yourself space. One of the biggest supports for burnout is not just running off to Sicily, although I'd absolutely recommend that too, but reconnecting with your identity outside of work and the things that matter to you far beyond your email inbox. So make sure you're taking time for yourself. And I mean really taking time. Because sure, this is important, what we do. It's not an A&E, we don't work in the ER. So prioritise yourselves. And remember, you are all, whatever roles you're doing, good leaders, great managers, but you are so much more than that. And finally, take the flowers because you deserve them. Leaders don't get anywhere near enough thanks. Your needs are important. You don't have to be perfect because good enough is good enough. Thank you.